Hello everyone, welcome to Diplomatic Briefing. At Thursday's regular press conference of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, a reporter asked, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Rudenko is currently in talks with China and India about resuming the trilateral cooperation mechanism, and it is said that Russia maintains a positive attitude toward promoting the operation of this mechanism. What is China's position on this? Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ling Jianhua said that China-Russia-India cooperation not only serves the interests of the three countries themselves, but is also beneficial to regional and even global peace, security, stability, and progress. China is willing to maintain communication with both Russia and India on advancing China-Russia-India cooperation. From the spokesperson's response, it appears that there is a chance for the China-Russia-India cooperation mechanism to be resumed. In fact, when it comes to the relationship among China, Russia, and India, the main issue has always been that India's attitude toward China has never been consistent. Sometimes, provoked by others, India wants to confront China; other times, spurred on by the United States, it believes itself to be an indispensable American ally in Asia and frequently provokes China. As a result, bilateral relations have been strained and discordant in recent years. However, since the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, it has become much more difficult for India to play both sides between the US and Europe and Russia. On top of that, with Trump's return, the demands placed on India by the US have only increased, leading to a shift in the diplomatic stance of Indian politicians. The Economist website published an article on July 15, mentioning that against the backdrop of US-China competition, India has always believed it could become an indispensable force for the US to counterbalance China. But with the arrival of Trump's second term, this belief has started to waver, making India feel like it's walking on thin ice. An Indian policy insider admitted that India's current situation is extremely difficult, especially after the India-Pakistan conflict in May this year, with a pervasive sense of uncertainty among the Indian elite. What truly shocked the Indian elite was not the conflict itself, but rather Trump taking credit at the end of the conflict, claiming it was his intervention that forced India and Pakistan to cease fire. To make matters worse, Trump even boasted that without him, the conflict might have escalated into a nuclear war. However, in the eyes of Indians, the nuclear arsenals possessed by both India and Pakistan are enough to make any escalation unbearably costly, so both sides would avoid the possibility of nuclear war. A few weeks later, Trump hosted Pakistan's military leader, Army Chief of Staff Munir, at the White House. The article states that for more than a decade, India's foreign policy has placed great emphasis on a core premise, that long-term ideological and economic confrontation between China and the United States is inevitable. Against this backdrop, India saw an opportunity and tried to present itself to the United States as an indispensable force in Asia to counter China. However, now the Indian elite have begun to question just how much weight China and the goal of containing China's rise actually holds in Trump's mind during his second term. A policy insider in New Delhi pointed out that India has never truly intended to take huge risks to confront or challenge China. After all, China's economy is 5 times the size of India's, and its military power is much stronger as well. On the contrary, India is more willing to cater to America's fantasy that India might confront China. The article points out that although India actually has limited willingness to confront China, the United States still showers it with favor. In 2020, during Trump's first term, when Chinese and Indian troops clashed at the border, the United States provided India with real-time geospatial intelligence. As one analyst put it, Americans were very generous at the time, and during the Biden administration, India was even hailed as the world's largest democracy and received a warm welcome in Washington. To support the US-Japan-India-Australia quadrilateral security dialogue, the Biden administration even tacitly allowed India to purchase large quantities of Russian oil after the Russia-Ukraine conflict. However, nowadays, these rewards are much harder to come by. On July 14, Trump publicly warned all countries trading with Russia that if Russia does not end the conflict within 50 days, they will face severe secondary sanctions. Within Indian political circles, there is still widespread confusion about Trump's true intentions. Is Trump's America First philosophy more inclined toward confronting China, or is he looking to strike a deal with China? A foreign affairs scholar close to the government said, "We understand that Trump might take a softer approach toward China. His combative style is a thing of the past. We need to proceed with caution." India still wants to maintain its position of balancing between major powers. In the eyes of some policy experts, if Trump decides to pull back from Asia, India could have more room to maneuver compared to Japan and South Korea, which are formal U.S. allies. The article says that, in the economic sphere, India is actually lacking in confidence. India was once seen as an alternative to Chinese manufacturing, benefiting from the U.S.'s friendshoring strategy by taking on production capacity from companies like Apple. But now, Trump is tougher on allies than on rivals like China. At the same time, China also seems to be wary of India, recalling hundreds of engineers and reportedly restricting the export of high-end equipment to India. Among Indian elites and policymakers, there is still no consensus on whether India should decouple from China or compromise if the US-China rivalry intensifies. The article cites that if Trump's actions were predictable, making such a strategic choice might be much easier. But because Trump is so unpredictable, India's situation is like walking on thin ice. Recently, exchanges between China and India have gradually warmed up. Last month, Indian Defense Minister Rajnath Singh led a high-level Indian delegation to China to attend the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Defense Ministers meeting held in Qingdao, Shandong. According to Indian media, although there are still differences between China and India, the more frequent high-level contacts indicate that the two countries are seeking to stabilize their relationship. The conclusion is that India is too opportunistic in the great power game, always trying to catch the wind, and has overly high expectations for its own position in the international order. When politicians like Trump, who don't play by the usual rules, appear in the US, India becomes somewhat flustered and at a loss. Ultimately, it all comes down to being overly confident. As for the claim that India never really intended to take huge risks to confront or challenge China, this is both an excuse for its earlier misjudgment of the diplomatic situation and its policy of competing with China, as well as a way to save face while turning to ease relations with China. However, China will not easily believe such statements, and will take all necessary precautions against potential risks. Bilateral relations may continue to ease, but China will not make concessions. It will likely be very difficult for India to obtain investment from China that includes technology transfer. And now that the United States no longer values India as an anti-China pawn, India has fallen into a state of anxiety over losing favor. Another U.S. ally, Europe, has also recently fallen into a state of confusion and helplessness. Recently, U.S. President Trump said that the U.S. would provide Patriot missiles to Ukraine, but the bill would be footed by the European Union. Reuters described this as Trump finally finding a way to arm Ukraine that makes him happy. However, Trump's demand that Europe bear the costs has caused slight friction in the relationship between the EU and the United States. According to reports from The Guardian and Reuters, on July 16, the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, who is also the Foreign Minister, Kallas, complained that Trump promised to treat but refused to pay the bill. Kallas told reporters, "If we are the ones paying for these weapons, then it is our support for Ukraine. So, this is Europe's support. We are doing everything we can to help Ukraine." He then continued, "If you promise to provide weapons but say someone else should pay for them, then those weapons aren't really from you, are they? We welcome Trump's announcement to provide more weapons to Ukraine, but we also hope that the United States can share the responsibility." Later on the 16th, Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zakharova said that the EU is footing the bill for weapons sent to Kiev, but in reality, it is funding Ukraine's demise. Zakharova wrote the following in a post on social media: "Kaya, meaning Kallas, you finally get it. Let us help explain it for you." This time, it's as if the EU is being asked to pay for a feast enjoyed by someone else, and in the end, that person dies. Am I right? Zakharova responded mockingly, saying that it seems Kallas has finally figured it out. According to a Reuters report, Trump made a solemn pledge, and NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg specifically named Finland, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, the Netherlands, and Canada, saying these 6 countries intend to participate. However, several informed US and European officials said that before Trump announced this plan, no one had been informed in advance. The report also stated that what Trump proposed was just a framework, lacking details on implementation. At present, the Czech Republic has already made it clear that it will not participate in Trump's weapons aid plan. Reuters also reported that countries such as Greece and Spain have repeatedly stated that they refuse to provide their Patriot systems to Ukraine. Several foreign media outlets mentioned that the governments of France and Italy also hold opposing views. The conclusion is that Trump is clearly acting in a hegemonic manner. Taking advantage of others is just business as usual for him. If European politicians are only realizing this now, they really need to reflect on why they elected people like Kallas, these naive and clueless types, as the EU's foreign minister. Remember earlier, she described Trump's demand for EU countries to increase their defense budgets as tough love, but said that having this kind of love is better than having none at all, so now the EU is enjoying some tough love from Dad. In fact, Kallas really shouldn't be complaining at all.